The 2020s is not going to be an era where tech solves your little getting your package faster problems. The 2020 is going to be a decade where technology solves real big problems. Food security, energy independence, energy sustainability, transportation, labor shortages, inflation, supply chain disruptions. We're talking about technology solving big time problems. Tech is graduated. It was in junior high school. Now it's in college PhD programs. Okay. We went from solving how to get your package faster to how do we make sure you have enough food to eat? Small problem, big problem. Small problems created $1 trillion empires. Solutions to small problems created $1 trillion empires. What are solutions to big problems going to create?
What's up, HGI investors, and welcome back to Hypergrowth Investing. I'm Aaron Davis, and as always, pleased to be joined by investment analyst Luke Lango. Luke, how are you doing today?
Well, as our audience can tell, I grew about 17 feet since last week. It's that middle age, that quarter life growth spurt that a lot of us go through. No, Aaron Davis actually came over this past weekend to San Diego and adjusted my camera to make it look better. Did a couple cool projects, so that's why I'm looking. I guess they say I look better from this angle. I don't know. That's what they say.
I didn't go to San Diego just to make him look better. We had a few other projects we had to get together for. Had to be in person, and it was good times all around. If you're interested in seeing some of that stuff, head on over to investorplace.com. But I'm looking forward to getting into our podcast as per usual. If this is your first time joining us, Hypergrowth Investing is the weekly podcast that picks the brain of investment analyst Luke Lango. Each week, we take an in-depth look at emerging tech and investment innovations, electric vehicles, cryptocurrencies, the metaverse, and more. Nothing is off limits. If you're joining us for the first time, we go up every Wednesday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you choose to listen to your favorite podcast. So make sure to hit like and subscribe to get Hypergrowth Investing as soon as it goes up. Again, I'm Aaron Davis, educator, lifelong learner, and your proxy into the mind that is the Luke Lango. We have a ton of things to cover. Let's dive right in. We're going to start today off with some interesting future tech. We're starting off with the Boston Dynamics dog. There was some for those of you who haven't seen it before, Boston Dynamics is a company that has building these robotics, whether it's a dog or human, that do all these crazy cool things to emulate either a dog or a human or any other kind of functions. But there was some creepy footage that circulated last week of a robot dog firing an automatic gun. I'm sure this was a fuel for plenty of nightmares, but you shared with me an alternative take on this news that is not being talked about nearly as much, despite the fact that it has much broader implications for the common person. Care to elaborate on what you shared with me earlier?
Yeah, sure. So that video is circulating around social media. It's getting a lot of hype and buzz because it's pretty freaky to see a robotic dog with a semi-automatic rifle on top of its back and then just kind of unleashing rounds at targets. If anything screams Will Smith, iRobot, dystopian future, it's that. But the fact of the matter is the robot couldn't handle the coil really. And so actually when it was shooting at those targets, it was completely missing. That's the story they don't tell you behind that video. So the technology there isn't terribly impressive. But I think it is important for our hypergrowth investing discussions because it does illustrate that robotics technology has graduated to a point where these robots of various types can successfully do various tasks. And while shooting in a semi-automatic rifle is one thing that a robot is still not very good at, things that robots are very good at include packaging and sorting goods at fulfillment centers, cooking and flipping burgers at restaurants, being a hostess at restaurants as well, checking people into hotels, creating pizza. There are now robotic vending machines out there where they can kind of create pizza on the spot. Paistro is the company there. So there's a lot of tasks. There are a lot of tasks out there that robots are actually very good at these days and which companies are using to develop new technologies or to develop new ways of doing old things, to do those things more efficiently. I think the most exciting application of this for me, Aaron, is warehouse robotics. That I think there's a lot of repeatable tasks that are done in warehouses that can be automated. Because when you have to think about it, remember, what's easy for a human is not necessarily easy for a robot, and what's easy for a robot is not necessarily easy for a human. What makes something easy for a robot is if that thing or that series of tasks can be modeled by predictable and repeatable data. So everything in life can be modeled by data. That's kind of like the class of mathematics called partial differential equations, where you can model everything by data essentially. But some things are easier to model with data than other things. The things that are easier to model with data are the things that robots are better at, but they're not necessarily the things that humans are better at. So I think that when you look at the warehouse operations, fulfillment center operations industry, you're looking at a lot of things: sorting packages, making big bundles, package wrapping them, labeling them, putting them onto trucks and sending them to outbound centers. Those tasks are highly repeatable and can be modeled very easily by data. And therefore, it's an arena where robotics can have a huge impact today, and indeed already is having a huge impact. So probably the headline partnership here that I'm most excited about, and it actually involves an investable opportunity for folks. So get out your pen and paper. Walmart last summer, I believe it was July 21, actually, so about a year ago, partnered with this company called Symbotic. And Symbotic is a public company now. Ticker is SYM. And Symbotic creates these end-to-end automated fulfillment center operations infrastructure system. So what they do is these packages come to the fulfillment center. Symbotic has these giant robot arms that take apart the bundles of packages. But what's the name for them? Why am I forgetting the name? Anyways, you know how these packages arrive and they're on those crates and they're like bundle wrapped and all that stuff. Anyways, these robot arms deconstruct that, take apart the items, and then put them onto the backs of these Symbots. And what these Symbots are these little robots that they're kind of like an electric vehicle meets a go-kart meets a forklift. And they put them on the backs of these things, these Symbots, which then drive around the fulfillment center and go and store these goods in the fulfillment center. And then when the goods are ready to be retrieved and sent to a store, a Walmart, then these Symbots go and retrieve those goods. They go to an outbound pair of giant robotic arms, which then take those goods and then put them into the inventory that is needed for a certain store. They put that together in a bundle, package wrap it, label it, and then put it on the truck. And then the truck goes to that local store. That is Symbotic's technology. They own that entire ecosystem, that entire end-to-end system right there. Walmart is using them. A year ago, Walmart said, okay, we're going to use you. I believe the deal was for 14 distribution centers. We're going to test your technology in 14 of our DCs across America to see if it does work. Reportedly, since then, Walmart has achieved record high throughput for those fulfillment centers that are using the Symbotic technology. So just a few months back, Walmart said, okay, screw it. 14? No, we want to have Symbotic technology in all 42 of our distribution centers. And I think it's supposed to be completed by 2027, 2028. So basically by the back half of the decade, every single regional DC of Walmart in the country of America will be completely automated by Symbotic technology. So that is an arena where I think that robotic technology is ready to have a major impact, and which is an opportunity we as investors can actually make money from, can profit off of. And so I think Symbotic's a name worth watching. There are a lot of other warehouse robotics names out there that I think are very interesting. That's a space that I'm very intrigued by today, especially since I think the investment thesis from a company's like Walmart's perspective. So Walmart, they just cut their guidance, right? What's interesting about that is Walmart actually boosted their sales guidance, but cut their profit guidance because they're feeling the sting of higher costs. They're having supply chain headaches, right? So in a world where inflation is a problem, where labor inflation is a problem, where costs are a problem, I'm going to do everything as a retailer, as a retail operator, to cut costs.
Yep.
Robotics, automation allow me to do that. They allow me to take what is costing me 10, 15, 20 salaries a year plus bonuses and all that stuff, and I can do it with one robotic technology system. So it is a huge cost saver at a time when these companies are looking for huge cost savers. So I think the investment value proposition for warehouse robotics, but robotics in general is very compelling. And as I said, it's not just warehouse robotics in general. Private company by the name of Miso Robotics, they make the robot that flips burgers, Flippy. They've signed a deluge of contracts here in 2022. I followed the company for a while because I know somebody who was a founding member of the company. And for a while, it was a pretty slow roll with Flippy. I think they signed on Kylie Burger, and they basically had one restaurant chain signed for like 2 or 3 years. I'm probably wrong on that, but that's what I remember. And then it seems over the past 8 to 12 months, they've signed on a half dozen or more. So their commercial ramp has significantly accelerated in the wake of labor shortages, in the wake of labor inflation, in the wake of supply chain disruption. So the investment value proposition for robotics technology is very compelling right now. From an investment perspective, the way I like to play it is warehouse robotics, because that's where I actually have publicly investable opportunities. Symbotic is one name there, SYM. But just broadly, I'm very excited about that space. So yeah, that's where my mind goes when I see that robotic dog shooting an AR-15 or whatever the heck it was shooting.
That's a lot of things that go through your head when you see a single dog shooting a gun. Yeah. But the real question, I think, is that when I was in San Diego with you, we did have a night where we had the burgers, and we had our friend Jack flipping the burgers. Would you replace Jack with a Flippy?
Not at home. I don't. I'm not Jack. For people that are unaware, Jack is on our team. He's one of our quants. And we were grilling and we were flipping burgers. That's at my home, and I'm not paying Jack to flip burgers. I'm paying Jack to create quantitative models. But no, I mean, the value prop there of the robotics is cost saving. So where there is a area where I can save money with a robot, and that robot can do the job just as effectively as human labor, if not more effectively, then I will do that. I mean, you have to just zoom out and look at the big picture here. Robots don't need salaries. Robots don't need pensions. They don't need benefits. They don't need healthcare. They don't need any insurance. Well, I guess they need maybe robotics insurance. So they don't need any of those things. They don't need a sleep. Right? They don't need a sleep ever. So they can be constant uptime, constant productivity. And they're less air prone. A good robot is less air prone than a human. So we are spiraling towards this world where a lot of the labor force will be automated out by robotics, because companies serve bottom lines, right? If I'm the CEO of a corporation, I serve my shareholders, I serve my profits. I don't really serve my employees. That's not how our capitalistic society works. And therefore, my job is to boost profits. And one way to boost profits is to increase revenue without increasing costs, or even while decreasing costs. That's what a robot will do. It'll increase revenue by having more uptime, more throughput, being able to get more stuff done, more stuff accomplished than the human can. Human works 9 to 5. Robot works 6 to 6, 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. nonstop. So more uptime, more revenue, lower cost, because you're getting rid of salaries and it can do more work per robot than per human. So your unit revenues go up, unit costs go down, your profits go up. That is a profit boosting initiative. So I don't see why the majority of companies won't fully embrace automation, robotics, all that stuff over the next 5 to 10 years. And it is a major threat to the current labor market. And I don't know how that plays out. You got to get in discussion of politics there. It's not something that we really cover in the show, but it's a very interesting chasm that we are going to jump. inevitably and eventually. And I think it'll be a very interesting day when we have to make some very big decisions with respect to how we treat the, I estimate somewhere between 10 to 15% of the labor force will be automated out. And so that is something.
I mean, I always come to that.
Go ahead.
I always come to that the Tim Burton Willy Wonka, where the grandpa he caps the toothpaste and he gets replaced by a robot. But then at the end of the movie, he's the guy that's servicing the robot that's replacing the caps on the toothpaste. So I don't know if there's growth there, but I mean, that's kind of where my head goes when we're talking about the automation process.
That's a really interesting thing to bring up, because something that people kind of misinterpret about the automation revolution is that they think it's all about robots. So it's about software. It's actually mostly about software. So for example, we just got access to this really cool AI model called DALL-E. And what DALL-E is, you guys can look it up, DALL-E. DALL-E is this AI system that has this repository of images it can access. You give it a prompt or a query. An astronaut eating an ice cream in space in a hyper realistic style, and it will produce a unique image for you based on that query.
That's never been created before. Yeah,
it's never been created before using its repository. So it basically says you give it its query, it goes through its repository of images and text, and it somehow puts together, okay, this is an astronaut, here's an ice cream. Now this is what outer space looks like. Look at hyperrealistic styles, that's what those look like. And it pieces it all together and then produces an original image that's never been created before, just for you, for that query. And it'll create, a half dozen in a matter of seconds, based on one query. So we are at that point now, man. We're talking the automation of digital media content creation, of creative art creation, of digital art creation. We're already there. Software, it's not great. We've used DALL-E quite a bit. It's not great, but it's pretty dang good. And it's good enough for us to see the promise of automation being a very widespread thing in the global economy. So it's just as much about software as it is hardware. And I do think we are spiraling towards a world where, again, 10 to 15% of the labor force, if not more, will be permanently displaced. And I think that when you look big picture, that's why we aren't so concerned about the inflation that we're seeing today. The inflation we're seeing today is a near-term temporary economic phenomenon, driven by COVID-related supply chain disruptions and an imbalance of economic demand, or rather an excessive economic demand as a result of stimulus checks and a bunch of quantitative easing over the past 2 years. This is a temporary phenomenon. Eventually, it will recede. But what will not recede is the secular deflationary force of technology, which is only going to grow more and more deflationary. If indeed 10 to 15% of the labor market is at risk of being completely automated out within the next 5 to 10 years, then you're talking about 10 to 15% of economic demand coming off the table essentially over the next 5 to 10 years. That's a world where inflation is not a problem and deflation is actually the major problem. So I think if you do take the big picture outlook here, inflation really is not something we need to worry about beyond the scope of 12 months. And when you look out 5 to 10 years, the thing you do need to worry about is actually deflation and how we solve that. So that kind of ties it back to the near-term investment thesis and what we're seeing out there in the markets today.
Well, while inflation may be cooling off, we're experiencing quite the heat wave right now. We're seeing headlines from all over the country and the world are calling out expectations for record high temperatures in the coming months. Boston even broke a daily record of high temperature last Sunday, and other cities in the Northeast are expected to follow suit. We've touched on renewable energy and energy storage tech as a solution to some of these problems before, but with the latest heat surge, it feels like there's more pressure than ever. Can you explain your thoughts on increasing frequency of extreme weather and how these new technologies can combat this impact in our lives?
Yeah. So the heat wave has been intense, right? I mean, I've got a bunch of my plants out here needing more water than I've ever given in my entire life. The heat wave has been intense. I know out there in Baltimore. What are you guys dealing with out there in Baltimore? What's the temp right now?
Before I left to come see you, it was about 100. So. Yeah, it's up there.
That's no fun. Yeah, my wife's from Phoenix, and yeah, we're not going out there this summer. I can tell you that much. But besides that, yeah, the heat wave's intense. The grid is strained. We need to reinvent the wheel on how we produce energy, how we store energy, how we distribute energy. And that's becoming very clear. This is not the last heat wave we're going to experience. Temperatures are becoming more extreme in either direction. That's just what's happening. So we have to develop technologies and new solutions to adjust to that. And that's totally fine, because that's what human history is about. We come to an obstacle. It sucks.
Yep.
Causes some pain. We develop a solution, we fix it, and we have a solution for 10, 15, 20, sometimes hundreds of years. And then we come into another obstacle, and then we do it all over again. That the history of humankind is innovation trumping problems, innovation trumping problems, innovation trumping problems. So that's what we have right now. We got a problem with excessive temperatures in either direction. We need to come up with an innovative solution to solve that. What is an innovative solution? Well, it's a combination of things. One, if there's a lot of heat out there, then that means solar panels should be really productive right now, right? I mean,
yeah,
all the homes in this neighborhood have solar panels everywhere right now. They're generating excessive amounts of energy, and they're selling it back to the grid, what they're not using. So I think solar panels is a huge step forward for advancing kind of energy independence, creating a more secure, sustainable, reliable energy grid. I believe energy storage systems are a big part of that. We need to start seeing energy storage, battery energy storage solutions in every home, on premise at every office, commercial building, behind every utility company. We need to start seeing these energy storage backup things. I think hydrogen is going to be a very big thing. I think wind is going to continue to, it's not really a huge part of the equation, but it's an important part of the equation. And I think it's going to continue to grow. So I just think what this heat wave does, what these rolling blackouts do, in some, they just emphasize the need for us to generate different types of electricity. I'm not saying that natural gas is going to be completely phased out. I think eventually it will, but let's. I'm a former basketball player, so let's think of in terms of an analogy to basketball. If I have one LeBron James on my team, and he is, averaging 40 points per game and carrying everything, eventually he's going to break down, and he's going to get injured, and my team's going to suck. So at that point in time, would I not like to have, a Steph Curry and more players on my roster to step in when LeBron gets hurt? That's what energy is about. Right now, we are so reliant on a single energy source that it's LeBron James, and it's been very effective and very good, but it's wearing and tearing, and you're seeing that in the rolling blackouts. The heat wave is emphasizing LeBron is on, his legs are giving out. His knees are bad now. We need more players. We need more. We need to diversify our energy sources. Let's get some solar in the mix. And we've been doing that. Let's get some wind in the mix. We've been doing that. Let's get some hydrogen in the mix. We haven't been doing that. That's going to be the new player that comes into the fold. That's going to be a major player in the next 5 to 10 years. Let's get some energy storage systems in the mix. We're just starting to see that come into the fold. So now we're creating this really well-diversified energy pie. And that is the energy pie that allows us to withstand these heat waves and not have rolling blackouts and not succumb to what are more extreme temperatures in either direction. So that's where I see energy going, and why I think the reinvention of energy is just starting. And over the next 10 years, we're going to see this massive diversification to all sorts of wonderful energy sources. And that diversification is going to allow us to trump this obstacle, so to speak.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Moving on to another interesting tech solution that aims to solve an emerging global crisis, the global food shortage. COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war, and a myriad of factors are sustaining food production and distribution across the world. One of the responses has been the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and even our funding projects like All Things Bugs, which develops insect-derived technologies for applications in food. While this series obviously makes for an interesting headline, I know you believe vertical farming which we've talked about before, is the more interesting solution to our global food crisis. Can you break down why you believe this is the more promising solution over the All Things Bug solution?
Vertical farming is very interesting because what it allows us to do is take a plot of land where you could only grow on the ground floor of that plot of land. And now you can take that and you can build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 layers on top of that. So you've just tenfolded your productivity of that piece of land on Earth. It is the analogy I like to think of it as, it's the home to the skyscraper, right? When land started becoming scarce and we wanted to build cities around water, we wanted to build cities on water, we wanted to build cities close to valuable resources. We couldn't build out anymore. We built up, and we built these 1,000-foot skyscrapers to the heavens in all major cities across the world. That's what vertical farming is. Now that farmable land is becoming scarcer, as opposed to building out, we're going to start building up. It's the skyscraper equivalent of farming. And so I'm really excited about that, because you can dramatically improve the food output of the world by building these essentially skyscrapers of farming. Right now, the technology is very nascent. It's very early. The vertical farms that are in existence are only growing basically leafy greens, some vegetables. There's no meat production going on. There's no wheat production going on. So it's very basic stuff right now. But you got to start somewhere, and this is a good starting block. And we're taking steps towards a world where we can create these, essentially, I think we're going to create skyscraper cities of farms. So you're going to have one giant skyscraper for leafy greens, one giant skyscraper for vegetables, one giant skyscraper for cows and all sorts of meats, chickens, whatever it may be, one giant skyscraper for wheat. You're going to have these skyscraper cities of farms. And that's a world that produces a lot more food than the one we have today. So that's why long-term, big picture, I'm really excited about vertical farming. The reason it's happening now, a couple reasons. One, food security is an issue. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine wheat came offline. Russia wheat came offline. That's a lot of the world's wheat. All of a sudden, we're feeling food shortages across the world. Food prices, as all of us know, grocery stores have been soaring. So you got a need there. There's an urgency about the problem. And then two, there have been plunging costs as it relates to when you talk about these skyscraper farms. Something that's really a big part of them, a necessary and critical component of them, are LED lights, right? You need perfect lighting, because the whole idea of it is each layer of this farm replicates what it's like to be outdoors in ideal growing conditions. So that means you need the perfect light, the perfect temperature, the perfect amount of moisture. The biggest thing in that is the light. You need really advanced, high quality LED lights that can replicate the sun. Those are expensive, but LED light costs have followed a very impressive cost decline curve over the past 10 years. And so now these LED lights are costing less and less and less, and they're at a point where we can start making vertical farms at semi-economical levels. And as those costs continue to go down, the unit economics of vertical farms are going to continue to improve. And because you have to understand that not only are the costs coming down, but if the costs come down of LED lights, I can get more LED lights, which means I can improve my output of that vertical farm, so my unit revenues go up. So this is a situation where unit revenues rise as unit costs fall, meaning the unit economics get very much more attractive in the coming years. So we're really excited about vertical farming. We think it's really early. We're not expecting this to be a big thing by 2023, 2024, 2025. But we do think vertical farms, they already are a thing, but they're going to become more of a thing by 2025. And by 2030, we think upwards of 10% of the world's food supply could be grown in vertical farms. And that number is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I think it kind of is there is no alternative here. I think that is the only viable route forward.
So going back to your take on alternative energy, you like the idea of diversification. You have solar, you have wind, you have hydrogen. Is there an argument on the other side for diversifying the food shortage with something else like the Bill and Melinda Gates project? Or is, like you just said, is vertical farming the only path that you see being that sustainable?
No, we are absolutely at a point where resource depletion rather is a big problem on planet Earth, regardless of what resource we're talking about. If it's energy, if it's food, if it's farmable land, resource depletion is a big thing. So in the face of resource depletion, the answer is always diversification. You always have to diversify what resources you're pulling from. You're pulling from vertical farms, good. You're pulling from things like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, what they're doing, good. You're pulling from regular farms, good. Greenhouses, that's a different type of indoor farming. Let's pull from that too, right? Let's pull a little bit from everything, just like the energy pie. Yes, resource depletion requires diversification to truly solve. And that's why I think that the future of farming, the future of food is going to have a little bit of all of this stuff. From an investment perspective, I like to always look at it from an investment perspective.
Sure.
I want to see the thing that if we talk about this pie, I want to find the sectors that are going to grow the most, right? Their piece of the pie is going to expand the most. And when I look at the energy sector, I think hydrogen is the one that grows the most. Energy storage, I think, grows second. When I look at the food sector, I think vertical farming is the one that grows the most. So that's why I spend my time talking about vertical farming in the food sector. But no, that is not to belittle any of the other efforts that are going on here. I think they're all going to end up proving necessary to solve the food security issues, food shortage problems across the world today. But I think the one that's the most investable, because it's going to grow its share of the pie the most and the fastest, is vertical farming.
Well, talking about excessive uses of our resources, something interesting hit the news the other.
You know what, Aaron?
Kylie Jenner and EVTOLs.
Let me cut you off there for a second. I'm sorry. I wanted to.
Nope,
I just thought of this. I had a conversation with some folks. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and it's very necessary to what we just talked about. We are talking about technologies solving resource depletion problems. We're talking about tech solving big problems now. If you think about the evolution of digital technologies over the past 20 years, they've been solving small problems. Amazon figured out how to get us our packages faster. Cool. Netflix figured out how to allow us to watch movies from our home without having to go to the movie theater and pay, $15 a head. Cool. Thanks, Netflix. Facebook, Meta, figured out how to connect the world online so we didn't have to, we could stay connected with people as opposed to having to write them letters or flying across the country to see them. Thanks, Netflix, or thanks, Facebook. That's pretty cool. When you look into DoorDash, figured out how to deliver food to us. Cool, thanks. Uber figured out how to get us rides to places. Cool, thanks. These are problems to solve, yes, but they're not big existential crisis problems. Yet, by solving these somewhat intermediate level problems, these companies still built trillion-dollar empires. Now we're graduating. The 2020s is not going to be an era where tech solves your little getting your package faster problems. The 2020 is going to be a decade where technology solves real big problems. Food security, energy independence, energy sustainability, transportation, labor shortages, inflation, supply chain disruptions. We're talking about technology solving big time problems. Tech is graduated. It was in junior high school. Now it's in college PhD programs. Okay. We went from solving how to get your package faster to how do we make sure you have enough food to eat? Small problem, big problem. Small problems created trillion-dollar empires. Solutions to small problems created trillion-dollar empires. What are solutions to big problems going to create? That's why we get so excited about the future. Because when we look at it from a perspective of what types of problems we're solving, we are solving infinitely larger problems over the next 10 to 15 years with tech than we solved over the past 10 to 15 years. Yet over the past 10 to 15 years, solving those small problems created trillion-dollar empires. It reasons that by solving these much bigger problems, the companies that actually do that will be $10 trillion, $20 trillion companies the size of entire economies, the size of the entire U.S. economy. That is entirely possible given the precedent of what Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon have done by solving what, quite frankly, are not really that big of problems. And that's why we're really excited. We think we're in that inflection point. Tech went from solving small problems to now it's going to start solving big problems. So while the rest of the market has been freaking out about a tech meltdown, about the end of technology, we see it as just a natural reset button before a real tech renaissance, before we actually get going to see what tech can do to power the world forward. It powered the world forward over the last 20 years, sure, but it took like 2 baby steps. We're about to take 8, 9, 10 giant leaps forward. That's why we're really excited about what's going to come down the pipe over the next, 10 to 15 years. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that because it seemed like very natural with what we were talking about. I think it's a very high level perspective to keep on technology investing, just on technology developments in general.
Well, I'm interested to hear your take on what the next topic, the problem that it solves, because it is an interesting technology, but it is getting a little bit of flack right now. Kylie Jenner took plenty of heat last week for her private 17-minute flight in an EVTOL from Camarillo and Van Nuys in California. Her critics emphasized the excessive and unnecessary carbon footprint of the trip. And I'm sure you're not overthinking Kylie Jenner's travel schedule. I know you have strong thoughts on EVTOLs or electric vehicle takeoff and landing vehicles and how they will transform the future of transportation. How are these new transportation going to change what we've just talked about? And can you fill us in on the latest developments of this industry?
Right. So EVTOLs are a very interesting technology that revolves around the idea that highways are getting crowded. Going from point A to point B in the same city takes a while, is now becoming absurdly expensive with Uber fares and taxi fares and Lyft fares. And so why can't we come up with a better transportation method from getting, let's say, from your home to the airport, or from your office to your home, or from, at San Diego to LA, or from San Francisco to LA, or from New York to Boston? Let's come up with more efficient modes of transportation. EVTOLs are the answer to that problem. They are these helicopters, basically, that are electric, but absolutely silent, travel much more quickly, and can take off vertically, travel horizontally, land vertically. So they're like the next evolution of helicopters. And what companies are trying to do, Joby Aviation, Archer, companies like that, Lilium, they're creating the aircraft. And after they created the aircraft, their plan is to launch essentially Uber for the skies, where they're going to build these giant vertiports, or these airports for these things. You're in your home. You drive 5 minutes to your local vertiport. You park your car. You hop in the EVTOL. The EVTOL takes you to the airport in 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You then deplane from that, and then you go on to your real plane. You go from San Diego to Baltimore, San Diego to New York. Alternatively, you drive to your local vertiport, you hop in the EVTOL, and you go from San Diego to LA, as opposed to having to go on a plane, because it's going to be much cheaper. That's one application. The other application is for delivery of packages and cargo transit. So as opposed to taking trucks across the country, as opposed to taking a truck from San Diego to LA to San Francisco, you put packages on this EVTOL and it transports them more efficiently that way. So there are many applications of what they're building for EVTOLs, and I am very excited about it because I do think the problem they're solving is pretty important. It's not food security important, but it's important in terms of saving people's time. It's important in terms of saving people money. And it's important in terms of decarbonization and pushing forward the whole electric transportation movement. So I think it is an important problem to solve. The companies there are very early stage. The most advanced is Joby. Joby plans to launch commercial operations by 2024. So that's about 2 years away. But I think they're so far, based on their development, they are on track to do that. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting come 2023, 2024, when these operations are about to launch. What they look like, how people respond. Is this actually going to be a massive industry? I think so. And I'm really excited to be invested in the space for now.
Now, it's interesting that you say that, these EVTOLs, they're trying to solve the problem of, traffic and congestion, and totally understanding that, a car can only move on an XY axis. It's bound by gravity. These are not. They have the Z axis. You can have multiple levels. But isn't there an argument that if everybody wants to use an EVTOL and everybody's going to the EVTOL port and for that 5 minute away, that there's going to be that same traffic and congestion and that same amount of time waiting for the next EVTOL?
Yeah, so that's why you got to build a lot of them. But you also have to consider that when you're flying around, there aren't roads. It's sky, right? Sky there's no constraints up there. So these things have to fly along routes that make sure they don't run into each other. But that's why you got to build a lot of them, and that's why these things have to accommodate multiple riders. So it's not just like one per person, one ride per person. For most of these they're building right now are 5, 6, 7 seats. Probably in the future, they're going to want to build ones that are 10, 15, 20 seats. So now you're talking more like bus-like transportation as opposed to car-like transportation.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then shifting gears into our market check-in. Earnings season is in full swing, and this is arguably the most critical week of this year. There have been tons of big earnings, and the first economic data is coming in. First, can you let us know what you're looking at with this week's earnings with some of the big tech names like Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, and Apple reporting?
Yeah, so we've gotten a whiff of earnings so far. They've been pretty good. The thing is that the bar is so low that companies don't need to report excellent numbers to provide an upside surprise. Pretty much not awful cuts it. And specifically, what you want to see is you want to see companies, regardless of what they report this quarter, say that things are getting better, that Q3 is going to be better, that Q4 is going to be better. We saw that with Tesla. Tesla had real big margin weakness, especially on the gross margin line in Q2. But Elon said, you know what, supply chain hell, it's improving. It's over. Like things are looking a lot better. Our production is going to ramp meaningfully over the next 6 to 12 months. So that caused the stock to rally, lifted the whole market with it because they basically said, we hit a snag in Q1, Q2, but we're coming out of it. We're crawling our way out of this hole right now. Netflix, same thing. Netflix lost 900,000 subscribers in the quarter, but they're guiding to add 1 million next quarter. So they've lost subscribers 2 quarters in a row. Now they're saying we're going to inflect back to positive subscriber growth in Q3. We got into a hole. We're crawling our way out of it. The stock responded positively, lifted the whole market with it. Then you had Snap. That was the other side of the token. Snap said, hey, we only grew revenues at 13% year over year in Q2. We're going to do, we're not providing a guide for Q3 because it's so awful, and we're actually flat year over year so far. So they fell into a hole and they're not crawling out of it yet. They went from 13% to flat. If they said we're up 15%, that'd be them crawling out. Stock would have reacted positively and the market would have been lifted as a result. Instead, stock reacted negatively. So it all depends on what these companies say is going to happen, because we all know the past 3 to 6 months have been bad. So we want to know, is it going to get better? Tesla and Netflix said yes. Snap said no. What are Microsoft and Google going to say? I think Microsoft and Google will say it's going to get better. And I think that's going to lift the market. By the time our listeners hear this, they'll know if I'm right or wrong. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I think Amazon is not going to lift the market. I think Amazon's going to have they're going to say things are getting worse. Shopify just laid off 10% of its workforce because e-commerce trend is substantially slowing. And we're seeing that. Now, something I do want to point out here, because I don't think, actually, I know we haven't talked about it yet. So e-commerce trends are really getting crushed right now. Like people shopped online like crazy during the pandemic. And then that's really moderated ever since. And people actually are going back to malls and brick and mortar shopping. It's becoming a big portion of people's shopping behavior. So e-commerce trends are really slowing. I think there's potential for it to reaccelerate. And that's why I'm actually looking into maybe saying, hey, let's buy this dip in Shopify stock. Hey, if Amazon drops, let's buy that dip. Because I think something the market's not thinking about right now. which is crazy. And maybe I'm overstating this, but I think it's understated by the market, the risk.
Okay.
Monkeypox.
Really? Okay.
Monkeypox and the new COVID-19 strain. The new COVID-19 strain is spreading like crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really know the numbers on it, but I know that it's spreading like crazy. The monkeypox thing, I just got a notification. US has the most cases, like 3,400.
Wow. Okay.
And San Diego just got its first case. So it feels like that the monkeypox thing feels like it is where COVID was in early February 2020.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not saying a big lockdown's coming. I'm not saying a big public health crisis coming. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is 2 years ago, all of us remember COVID-19 and being locked down. So if monkeypox does start to circulate, and it's right now, I'm looking at the numbers, it looks like it's spreading very rapidly in the United States. If monkeypox continues to spread very rapidly, it's going to cause some consumers to think twice about going out. It's going to cause some people to, like, if they're at home and they're kind of like, should I go to the store and shop or shop online? I'm probably going to shop online. I don't want, the monkeypox. It's not going to completely change consumer behavior, cause lockdowns, public health crisis like COVID-19 early 2020. But I think there is a potential, a very real potential for it to change consumer behavior at the margin. So this big online spending slowdown we're seeing could reaccelerate. The big digital advertising slowdown we're seeing could reaccelerate. I think that monkeypox has the potential to cause some, like I said, on the margin consumer behavior changes, which could reaccelerate the e-commerce trend. So that's something I'm monitoring very closely. I think the market is not paying attention to it, but I think it's worth paying attention to. I've seen and heard enough people in my circle kind of freak out a little bit about it that it's causing me to say, hey, maybe consumer behavior is going to change, if just 10%. To redirect the trends of some of the things happening in the marketplace right now. Not to mention, COVID-19 was this thing where it's like you have trouble breathing. Like obviously, a lot of people worried about dying from it, but the actual like your bodily reactions to it, it wasn't like a zombie like disease. It wasn't Resident Evil, right? Monkeypox is kind of like that. Right. Monkeypox is like you get these giant. It looks nasty.
Yeah.
People care. The aesthetics of a disease matter.
Yeah.
I think people are very concerned about getting monkeypox, even if they don't think they'll die from it, which I think the fatality rates on it are very, 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 very low, especially in first world countries. But just the aesthetics of it, like nobody wants to get that. It looks super painful and annoying, and the spots take a while to heal and clear. So nobody wants that. So I do think there is something to the monkeypox thing that we should be paying attention to right now. Again, no reason to freak out. I don't think it's going to change the economy or the market, but I do think it could redirect some trends. And I think one of the trends it could redirect is a favorable shift back towards e-commerce. So I think the e-commerce names really beating up right now could be worth taking a look at.
Well, I'm sure you're going to stay on top of that one. Second, with our market check-in is that we've got a Fed meeting and updating its target rate on Wednesday. What are your expectations here? And are you going to be looking for anything particular with its supporting commentary?
By the time this comes out, the Fed will have made its decision.
Yep.
So you guys are going to be able to judge if what I'm about to say is true or not. But I think... and guessing what the Fed's going to do is it's tough, man. It's tough. But I think they're going to hike 75. I think they're going to sound a more dovish tone than expected, meaning I think Powell is going to be like, we see the economy slowing. We're going to still, our number one goal is to fight inflation, kill inflation. But if the economy starts to really nosedive and inflation nosedives with it, we're ready to pivot. We're ready to provide support to the markets and not fight against them. So I think if he does all that, which I think he will do, that will provide a lift to stocks. And I believe a large part of the rally in July, it actually started in June. Actually, for a lot of stocks, it started back in May. I think a lot of that rally has to do with inflation decelerating to a point where they believe the Fed is going to provide that sort of statement on Wednesday. If they don't, I think there's massive room for a pretty big drop in all stocks. But I do think that Powell will come to the rescue, so to speak, tomorrow.
Okay.
So that's what I'm looking for from the Fed. But again, by the time you guys listen to this, you will know exactly.
You'll know whether we were right or wrong.
Whether I'm right or wrong. I'm not placing any short-term bets on it. Not saying buy this today because of the Fed, buy that today because of the Fed, sell this tomorrow because of the Fed. I don't advise doing any of that stuff. But what I am saying is I do think that as a long-term investor, it's reasonable to expect the Fed to provide a lift to your portfolios tomorrow. Hopefully.
All right. Moving on to our crypto check-in. Any updates, or is it the same story as we've been saying for the last few weeks? Different week as we continue to consolidate around the $20,000 level.
Yeah, it's consolidate time, Aaron. We had that breakout to 23, pushing up to 24. A lot of people thought that was going to be a start of a real breakout. We said no, it's just hitting the upper channel of a trend and it's going to come back down. And it is. I think we broke below 21 today. So I think we're going to continue to consolidate between 17 and 23, 24. That 20 plus or minus 3, basically. I think we're going to stay in that range for a while. And once we do break out, I think it's going to be a meaningful breakout, but we got to consolidate. And you have to remember, consolidation is very healthy. The longer we consolidate, my theory is the longer we consolidate for, the longer the breakout will be once this is done. If we consolidate for another week and then we start breaking out again, I don't think that breakout's going to be sustainable. If we consolidate for 3, 4, 5 more months, the breakout subsequent to that will be sustainable probably for 2 or 3 years. So I'm in the boat of rooting for consolidation here because it's allowing us to kind of get the ammunition, load it up, and then ride what should be a multi-year wave higher. So I'm actually rooting for consolidation. I think we continue to get consolidation. And it's the same story as last week.
Awesome. That's all for our topics, but we have a ton of fan questions this week, Luke. People want to know your thoughts. So we're going to ask these questions and we're going to give them some answers.
Okay.
Starting off with Rob Norman. 3D homes take 3 months, but 3D printing has a very slow adoption. Do you think 3D home building can help the low supply of homes?
Oh, absolutely. And there's also, I think, again, resource depletion requires diversification to solve. So we have LeBron James of home building, the old school way of building homes, getting a bunch of lumber, construction workers, hammer, build it up, concrete, all that stuff. Boom, that's the home. But we've seen that, LeBron's knees are getting weak. We can't lift that much anymore. We can't create that many homes anymore. There are labor constraints. There are supply constraints. So we need to develop new methods to help ease the supply shortage and boost home building productivity levels. We are going to do that via 3D printing. These pre-built home companies, I don't know if you guys have seen the like box homes, kind of. I think you're the one that pointed them out to me a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
That is a solution that'll help as well. It's going to be a variety of technologies that come to the forefront to help improve the supply situation in housing. I think 3D printing, again, what do I like to invest in when we talk about the pie? What's going to take the biggest share of the pie, grow the fastest, grow the most? I think 3D printing is that because we're already seeing 3D printed homes happen. Rob Norman, you said yourself, 3 months to build. They're very fast. They're very cheap. They're very effective. And the homes they build are pretty cool looking. I kind of like the little layer by layer design. I think it's very modern and sleek. So I think that 3D printing is going to be that biggest share gainer. I see it having a huge impact in the housing market. The company there that is the most promising is Icon, privately held, waiting for it to IPO. When it does, going to be worth looking at that prospectus to see, is that an opportunity we want to get in? But Icon is definitely the leader of the 3D printed home kind of renaissance.
All right. Next question comes from CS Low. Plug Power was down last week, but came back up this week. What is happening to Plug, and are they in your favorite watch list for hydrogen fuel play?
Plug Power is, they're the 400-pound gorilla in hydrogen. They've been in the hydrogen fuel cell game for a while. They dominated by starting with forklifts and selling hydrogen-powered forklifts or hydrogen fuel cells for forklifts to Walmart, Amazon, and many other companies. And they've dominated that market because that was a arena in which hydrogen held a lot of promise, right? Hydrogen is you want something that has constant uptime, that can be recharged pretty quickly. That's a forklift. And so it made a lot of sense to apply them to forklifts. They dominated that market. They got a lot of expertise in building hydrogen fuel cells and doing that. And then 2020 rolled around, and all of a sudden everyone was like, the future is here. We're 10 years into the future. And Plug Power stock went from $3 to, I think, like something like 70 and change. It went really, 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 really high. Management, very smartly during that period, leveraged all that hype to raise a ton of capital. Something like $5, $6, $7 billion that they've just kind of plowed onto the balance sheet. They're now using that money to build an empire in hydrogen. They're building all these green hydrogen production facilities. They're landing all these partnerships. They're striking deals across Europe and Asia. They're developing hydrogen cars in Europe. Like, they basically first mover, leverage first mover to ride a bunch of hype, use that hype to raise a ton of capital, and now are deploying that capital to create an untouchable empire in the hydrogen economy. So when hydrogen does become massive over the next 10 years, I think it's going to evolve into something massive. The company that's building the foundation for that is Plug Power. So are they one of my favorite hydrogen plays? They are my favorite hydrogen play, bar none. Full stop, point blank, period. So I think that Plug Power stock, it's going to oscillate with the market. That's totally fine. The valuation is compelling below $20. The stock, I think, can go way, 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 way higher in the long run. I would, I am a buyer of that stock at these levels for sure.
Okay. Agami85. Hi, thanks for this housing outlook. Would you be willing to compare SoFi with Square, particularly in terms of their growth potential within the next 5 years or so? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're a little bit different. They compete with the Cash App and SoFi a little bit, but Square is more a enterprise tool. They've created a point of sale software system and hardware system for merchants and restaurants and all those people that sell goods. SoFi has created a super app for people that buy goods. So they're kind of on the opposite ends of the ecosystem. Square has tried to branch over to the buy side with Cash App. I've used both. To me, SoFi is a far superior application than Cash App, and much more mature application as well. In terms of growth potential over the next 5 years, I would say SoFi has a lot more growth potential. It's smaller. I think the market it's going after is more fragmented than the one that Square is going after. I am a little bit worried with Square when it comes to, I guess they're Block now. Excuse me, Block. All these companies, Aaron, changing their names. I think Block is going to have a lot of competition in the buy now, pay later space. They made that big splashy acquisition with Afterpay. I think there's a lot of potential for Afterpay to integrate into the seller ecosystems. But Apple got into buy now, pay later. It seems like everybody's going to buy now, pay later. So I think that is going to be I don't know. I'm not saying Block is not going to nail it. I'm just saying that it's going to be a very competitive landscape. And I don't see anybody becoming like the dominant 400-pound gorilla there. I see them all kind of 10, 15% market share players. So I do like Block in the long run, absolutely. But Block feels like it's had its day in the sun, and now it's going to kind of become a secular compounder. Whereas SoFi hasn't had its day in the sun yet, will have its day in the sun, and then will turn into a secular compounder. So in terms of upside potential over the next 5 to 10 years, I think SoFi has far more upside potential than Block.
Okay. Next question from Rusty Russ. Luke, last week you and Aaron featured my question and suggested to slowly sell oil stocks. I'm hearing that Mr. Navalier is suggesting the contrary right now, particular in DVN. What are your thoughts on that? I just sold around 20% of my position in FANG. Should I be buying it back now? It looks like those are two questions, actually. But let's start off with the first one, basically your take on DVN and whether he should continue to sell.
Yeah, so I don't think I can really comment on DBN and FANG because they're not really in my coverage universe, and they're not. I don't know the specific fundamentals of those stocks. So I really like to talk about things that I feel like I should be able to be given an opinion on because I know a lot about it, and I don't know a lot about those two names in particular. As it relates to Louis and I having different opinions on the oil sector. The old saying is that two very two equally intelligent people can look at that's the same situation and come to different conclusions, and that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
that's here. There are plenty of smart people on the bullish side of the oil aisle, and there are plenty of smart people
Mm-hmm.
on the bearish side of the oil aisle. I can't speak to the Louis specific thoughts or outlook on the oil space, but what I can say is I'm pretty confident that well, we've been right. We were saying oil topped it, when we came out and kind of said short oil on
Yep.
this podcast to our subscribers, oil was
Mm-hmm.
120, 125, and it's collapsed to
Mm-hmm.
90, and now it's bouncing in the 90s. So we've been right thus far. Do I think we'll continue to be right? Well, I'm not pounding the table on short oil now here at 90. I was pounding on it at 125. But I do think oil can continue to move lower. A recession looks like a very likely. It looks like we're already in one, actually. It looks like a recession is going to continue to get worse over the next few months. As that happens, oil probably won't succeed. I don't see a world wherein demand destruction doesn't bring about oil prices or lower oil prices over the next few months. So as far as how to trade oil right now, again, I think it's going to have these balances, but I think it's going to stay range bound in the 90s, and I think it can pop down into the 80s and 70s. Cities out there saying that we're going to see $65 oil by the end of the year. My technical analysis and fundamental analysis corroborates that. I think if I were to put a price target, say my base case price target, I'd say $65 oil by the end of the year is very likely. Again, I personally am not making any bets on this. I'm not telling my subscribers to make any bets on this. I was very confident on the bearish oil thesis when oil was at 125, pushing all-time highs, near all-time highs, ex 2008, ahead of a recession. Thought that was absolutely silly and nonsensical. So I was very confident in the short oil call up there. Now that it's already dropped 20, 25, 30%, a little bit less bullish on the short oil call, but still I think there is a higher likelihood oil goes lower from here than higher. So that's kind of the wrap on my oil thesis right now.
Okay. Last question comes from Jacob Tang. How bullish are you on Compass since the average analyst prediction is 500% and that it just keeps going up while almost everything else is going down?
I think we're talking about Compass Pathways, the psychedelic stock.
CMPS.
Yeah. Yeah. Analysts love that one, right? Those price targets are high. Our price target's high. Yeah, I think that stock has tremendous potential. I think it's really slept on.
Yeah.
I think psychedelics. We talked about this last week. Psychedelics will represent the status quo in mental health care over by 2025, 2030, and Compass Pathways has the leading drug in psychedelic inspired medicines with COM360, has many other drugs in its pipeline that are well ahead of peers, and has a very talented team and fully loaded balance sheet to keep developing more novel therapeutics in this genre. So I really like this stock long term. Absolutely. Like you said, the analyst price target's very high. Our price target's very high. Can it soar to that $100 level? People might say I'm crazy for saying yes, but I absolutely think so. I really do think that Compass Pathways will be a $100 stock within 12 to 24 months. This stock has tremendous potential. Once those COM360 results come out and this thing starts really moving along the pipeline, I think the stock could really fly higher, especially if risk sentiments across the market start to improve. And we do get what we think is going to be a real big upcycle in 2023, the beginning of a new bull market. If that does happen, that's a backdrop against which Compass Pathways absolutely soars.
All right. Well, great insights for our listeners are always. That kind of wraps us up. Luke, do you have any last words before we close out everything for the day?
We're in the midst of probably the most important week for stocks of the year, if not of any year in the past several years. We're getting all the big tech earnings: Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple. So we're getting all the big tech earnings. We're getting the Fed announcement, and we're getting PCE data on Friday. Stocks have rallied pretty big into this week. wouldn't be surprised to see stocks get back some gains this week, regardless of what the news is. So we're seeing that right now. Monday and Tuesday have been bloody days. But the give back that we've seen on Monday and Tuesday does not change the short-term trend of stocks, which is up and to the right now. So I think what we see here is we see this week create some jitters, some volatility. We give back some of the gains we've seen since early June, but that give back hits some support and we continue on this short-term uptrend, which eventually turns into a long-term uptrend. I think we are in the midst of a generational turnaround from bear market to bull market. And when we go from late cycle bear market to early cycle bull market, those are the unique periods of time in which fortunes are made in the stock market. Like truly fortunes are made in the stock market. We ran an analysis and we looked at, so when you think of making fortunes in the stock market, you think of stocks that rise 10x, right? A stock that rises 10x, makes you 10 times your money in a year, is a fortune-making stock. So we looked at the number of stocks that rise 10x in any given year over the past 30 years, from 1990 to 2020. In that analysis, on average, in your regular year, 2, 3, 4 stocks rise 10x. It's not that often. We're talking the whole market, by the way. But in 2009, more than 25 stocks rose 10x. What happened in 2009? We had that generational turnaround from late cycle bear market to early cycle bull market. March 9th, 2009, we hit the bottom. We did that transition, late cycle bear, early cycle bull. In that year, more than 25 stocks rose 10x. That's more than 5x the average. Pretty impressive. Fast forward to 2020. More than 25 stocks, again, rose more than 10x in 2020. What happened in 2020? March 2020, we did that transition from late cycle bear to early cycle bull. Now, it was very fast. That was like a boom, boom, as opposed to 2008, 2009, which was like a long drawdown and do a long rebound. But still, bear market to bull market transitions, it again created a opportunity for investors to make 10 times their money, more than 25 of those opportunities in 2020. So we've had two very large bear. Oh, and then also, back in 2002, when we had a bear market to bull market transition, 2003, we had what was the number? I think it was something like 12 or 13, 14, somewhere between 10 and 15 stocks rise more than 10x in that year. So again, we've had 3 bear market to bull market transitions over the past 30 years. Each one of them has created a plethora of 10x opportunities in the market. We've gone from 3 or 4 on average, 2, 3, 4 to 15, 20, 25. That's why we're really excited about what we're seeing today. That we think we're in this transition point right now. If we are, history says not only will stocks surge over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, but our opportunities to score 10x returns in the market, to score really big returns. 10x is an arbitrary number. Call it 5 times, call it 2 times, call it 3 times, whatever you want. The opportunity to see those types of gains in the market, your odds just increase dramatically. So that's why we are really starting to get pretty bullish about what's going on. We're seeing a lot of data saying we're at a pretty critical turning point. If indeed we are, then there's some huge opportunities in the market today, especially when you look at that hyper-growth tech sector. I mean, the rubber band there has been stretched to the max. We're talking 70, 80, 90% drawdowns in a lot of those names. If you look historically at stocks like Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Microsoft, they've all gone through 80, 90% drawdowns, but that's where they max out. These stocks don't go down 95, 96, 97%. They tend to max out around 80 to 90% down. That's where we are with a lot of the hypergrowth tech stocks today. So that rubber band has been stretched super far, and I think it's ready to bounce back. So we are really excited about what we're seeing in the market today. And we think that the next 12 months could bring about some really big gains for investors strategically positioned in technology, in growth, in stocks that tend to do well as we transition from bear to bull market. So that's where we sit. That's our perspective. Optimistic.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Please, if you have any questions or comments for Luke, leave them in our comments section. We love to hear your feedback on any topics you'd like us to cover and see if we can answer any of your burning questions. Until then, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Bye, all.